Hello there, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel from this very professional YouTube setup. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the walk away movement that's taking place. I think it's a really good movement because it really allows people to be exposed to a different set of ideas that the mainstream media will just not acknowledge at all. So what are those ideas? You have people sharing their stories why they're moving away from the Democrat Party. Now that doesn't mean that they have unconditionally voted Democrat and now they're going to unconditionally vote Republican. That's not what it is. But it's about people sharing their stories as to why they don't have common goals with the Democratic Party anymore. And I wanted to add on to that. So I feel I have walked away from the left, and if you think your morals and your principles align with mine, then you should probably think about the same thing. I've walked away from the left, from the liberals, from the liberal ideology because I misunderstood the liberals. Whether that misunderstanding was my fault or theirs is up to you to decide, but I misunderstood them. I thought liberals, coming from the word liberty, these people must be for the individual. These people must be against identity politics. These people must be for individual freedom. And I was wrong. Liberals in America, at least today, oppose individual freedom. Liberals in America, the left in America, the Democrats, oppose things like freedom of speech. Now, I would understand if you say, well, it's not everybody on the left, it's some people. And you're probably right, but the fact is, all the attacks on freedom of speech, at least to my knowledge, is coming from the left. If not all, I would say 90% of the attacks and assaults on freedom of speech is coming from the modern left. The left does not want you to acknowledge reality. They do not want you to acknowledge that America is superior to other countries. They don't want you to acknowledge that certain demographics have a greater inclination for certain activities than other demographics. Well, one problem with not acknowledging reality is you can ignore reality, but reality will not ignore you. If you don't want to acknowledge that different demographics have different inclinations for certain activities, well, all you're doing is ignoring the underlying factors that makes those realities to be. If you don't want to acknowledge that the United States is better than other countries, well, then you don't want to acknowledge the factors that make the United States what it is. Freedom of speech, freedom, right to bear arms for self-preservation from the government. These things make the United States what it is, and all the attack on these freedoms is coming from one half of the American party. I might be biased in saying this, but I'm sure I can meet you halfway if you at least acknowledge that most of the attacks on these fundamental freedoms is coming from the left of center of the American political spectrum, which is the left. And then there's this issue of socialist utopia, an idea that is pushed almost entirely by the left. Listen, there's no such thing as socialist utopia. Big government takes people's freedoms away and they don't give it back. How do I know this? I come from a big government country, okay? In my country, the government provides free healthcare, the government provides free education. And trust me, I know that there's no such thing as socialist utopia because there's really no such thing. In the United States today, a country that is built on capitalism, you have people sitting at Starbucks, sipping on champagne, tweeting in their iPhones, going on and on about how awesome socialism is. And you would be blind to not know that almost all of these people are on the American left. And I disagree with this. Listen, socialism is messed up. It is absolutely messed up. There's no way socialism works good for anyone. You might look at certain European countries and say, well, socialism worked well. A lot of people point to Scandinavian countries. First of all, these Scandinavian countries, the examples put forward is like Denmark, Sweden. These are not socialist countries. A lot of these countries, if not all of these countries, are more business friendly than the United States, okay? And they have certain welfare programs that works out because these are small countries. All of Europe fits into the United States. The United States is massive compared to all of Europe, and these are just small parts of Europe. So the point that I'm trying to say is just because certain policies, not socialism, but certain policies, like for example, giving people healthcare, work for a small group of people, doesn't mean we can import those policies to a huge landmass like the United States. And listen, if you believe that socialism is better, and if the history of socialism is not enough to convince you that is not the case, If you have an American passport, you have certain privileges that other people can't. One of those privileges being you can travel all over the world. You can travel relatively inexpensively to these countries that were ravaged and destroyed by socialism. If you believe socialism is really the best way to go, just go to one of these countries. I'm not saying move there for good. I'm not saying go there on a 7-day trip. I'm saying go and live there for 1 year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3. Live and work there and see for yourself what happens when big government strips away individual freedoms. It's not something that I can explain. Even if I do, it might go over your head if you don't experience it firsthand. So go over to these socialist countries and see for yourself whether you have more freedoms there or more freedoms in the US of A. Anyways, my point is, because of all of these things, I cannot believe that I have any more common goals with the American left. I value freedom. I value individual freedom from the government. I value capitalism. I value freedom of speech. I value individual liberties. And I don't think that I don't believe that the left in the West, in particular in America, believes in those ideals anymore. Maybe that was not always the case, but I don't think they believe in those ideas today in 2018. So, if anything I said makes sense, please consider walking away from the Democratic Party. If everything that I said made total nonsense, if I appear to be just another bumbling idiot shilling for views on the internet, then completely disregard everything I said. But if anything I said made sense, do consider walking away.